Hey, Kyler here. Our aim for this show is to leverage every opportunity that life throws at us. I hope you find value in today's show. Welcome back to the Leverage Life Show. My name is Kyler Offenbacker, and if you followed our show at any time at all, you will realize that Cord is not here today. He is actually out and with a sick kiddo, and so our prayers are going out to them, and hopefully everybody's going to get better fast and soon as possible. But for the Leverage Life Show, if you're new here, we are all about leveraging every opportunity that life throws at you. And for today, we're going to continue with the diagnostic series and really talking about what asset gets sold first if there's kind of a time pinch and you need actual quick money or liquidity to actually cover estate taxes. So let's dive into it today. And so I really want to start with just walking you through a real moment, not a hypothetical, but a situation that actually potentially happens more often than you may realize. And so with real families, with real families that are building wealth, there many times there is going to be a primary breadwinner. So if that primary breadwinner passes away and their estate is significant, let's say they've got, commercial real estate, a business that they own, different portfolios, securities accounts with different financial advisors. So on paper, the family is very wealthy. Okay. But in practice, maybe the family is actually a little bit cash poor because the wealth is tied up in a lot of assets, and sometimes that can't just be converted to cash overnight. And the estate tax bill has to be due at a specific time that really doesn't care about, the real estate market or the timing of a business sale. So let's just kind of think through that for a second. Just use that as the frame of reference for today, that when someone passes away and they may have an estate tax bill, but they are lacking the liquidity to actually pay that estate tax bill, where's the money going to come from? That's the specific thing that we need to be talking about today. And in that moment, when a family is not making investment decisions, they're really on the defense, if you will. They're actually making more triage decisions. So, what can we sell? Who's going to buy it? How fast is this going to actually sell? At what price are we going to have to sell it for? Those are real questions that need to be answered. And a lot of times they're actually made under a maximum pressure and at a point of minimal leverage, if you will. And it really puts families at a really hard time. And it can just be a bad situation overall. So the liquidity problem, the liquidation problem it's a very visceral version of the wealth transfer gap. In the abstract concept of estate planning, sometimes this is something that becomes very concrete very fast. And the families who navigate the best are the ones where someone thought through the different hierarchies of their assets and said, hey, if this moment arrives, what are we going to do about it? And how are we going to actually accomplish solving this problem of liquidity? So let's dive into it a little bit more. So every estate, every estate has assets that can be converted to cash quickly. And there's a lot of times there's assets that can't. Liquid assets you can consider just, there are different portfolios such as, investments of securities, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, different cash accounts, money market accounts. Those things can be accessed relatively quickly. You can just sell it off. We've got the cash. Okay. Those are liquid assets. They are, and sometimes the first line of defense because those are the things that you have very readily available for you. For most high net worth individuals, the liquid assets in some ways are just a fraction of the actual total estate. And the bulk of the wealth is actually in real estate. It's in businesses they own. It's in different private investments. It's things that potentially take months to sell off and to sell properly. And a lot of times, and if you're in a pinch and you need to sell them under pressure, sometimes they might actually lose value because people know that you're trying to sell this under pressure. So the question to ask about your estate is this: if we needed to generate the cash equivalent of the estate tax bill quickly, in what order would we do that? Like, what gets sold first? What can realistically be sold in 30, 60, 90 days? And what's the difference between maybe a fair market value of that asset and what it would actually trade for if it was being forced under as a forced sale on the timeline? That gap between what something's worth and what it sells for when you have no choice, that is the hidden cost of inadequate liquidity planning. I want to say that again. That is the hidden cost of inadequate liquidity planning. It is real money that's leaving your family's hands, not because the assets were not valuable, but it's because the timing was wrong and the leverage was gone. So I want you to think about it this way. Think about means of selling a piece of real estate under pressure. So a well-positioned commercial property that would typically sell for really strong numbers in a normal sale with timing to the market, if it was done properly, it could be done well. You could find the right buyer, you can negotiate the different terms, the price, everything. A lot of times that property could be sold in a reasonable amount of time. But if the estate needs cash, sometimes that just tells a different story because many times buyers know when a seller is motivated, right? They know that there's a clock and there's a timeline to actually sell something, and the price of that starts to become more negotiable. So the wealth doesn't disappear, it just transfers. It's just not to the people that you spent a lifetime building it for. So a liquidity plan is not about being conservative with your wealth. It's about making sure that the transfer of your wealth happens on your terms, not on a timeline set by the IRS or a buyer that knows you have no choice. And so we have talked in this series and maybe in some other previous shows about Prince. He's a very clear example of how this has played out. So had a very large estate, roughly worth about $150 million, largely in music rights, real estate, business interests. So really no liquidity plan. The state, they spent years in settlement and just spent tons and tons of money to cover taxes and legal bills. And a lot of things, probably a lot of it was just sold under market value because there was pressure. Someone had to actually find liquidity to pay estate taxes. Now, that might be an extreme example. I don't know. But nonetheless, it's still a good example to use for this concept. And I will even actually say here in Arkansas, where we're at, that we've seen this happen before, or really in farming communities. Okay. So, if you live in a farming community, the farmers, their families, they're very well versed in how to keep their farm in the family. And if someone knows that there are estate taxes that need to be paid and a farm goes up for sale and the buyer knows, or buyers, I should say plural, know that they have to sell that farm to pay estate taxes, when is that farm going to get sold? It's not going to get sold within 30 to 60 days. I can promise you that. It's going to get sold at the estate tax deadline. And you know what's going to happen? The price that they want is going to come down because they know they have to sell it. Buyers know they can negotiate and they're in a position of leverage to buy that at a lower cost compared to what it's really worth. And so that is a real example that does happen. And like I said, we live in Arkansas, and there's a lot of farmers in Arkansas that are very, very well versed in the game of keeping wealth in the family. And many times people do advanced life insurance strategies to make sure that they have the liquidity in order to pay for their estate tax bill. So here's what it comes down to for today's episode. I want you to take away a practical piece of homework, if you will, to sit down and just say, or sketch out, if you will, just like your liquidation hierarchy. So not a formal, obviously legal document or anything like that, but just on a piece of paper, just quickly draft down, say, hey, these are the assets that I have. This is the value. How quickly could I turn this around if I really needed to convert this to cash? That's just a good exercise to do, and really sometimes can be eye-opening for people to say, hey, I don't have as much quick turnaround cash assets as I thought I had. And so if that is you, that may be a position or a gap that you may need to be thinking about if you need liquidity in the future for potential estate tax, or if you have estate tax exposure. So that gap is that's a real problem. And one of the ways that we can solve that specifically is through life insurance. So structured correctly and owned by the right trust, a strong life insurance policy allows people to have the liquidity they need to pay for estate taxes. It's designed to fill exactly that gap. Maybe not necessarily an investment, if you will. It's not a savings vehicle. It's a vehicle to specifically solve the liquidity problem that you may be facing in the future. So you got to know your hierarchy. You got to know your gap. The plan, the build the plan that makes this all possible. It all comes down to structure planning and just making sure that you have the right people on your team to make sure this actually works out the way it needs to. So at the end of the day, I know if you love your family members, you don't want to pass along a burden to them. And if you want to make sure that you are extending the amounts of love that you already have for your family, then you need to make sure that you are planning properly to make sure that your family is taken care of for the future. So that's all I've got for today. Go ahead and go do that homework. If you have any questions about anything that we have talked about in this diagnostic series, go ahead and text us to go ahead and text show to 479-396-3528. Again, that's show to 479-396-3528. Anyways, I'm flying solo today. We will have Cord on next week for the next episode in the diagnostic series. We will see you guys next week.